On the safety and security side, you know, what we did last year was a really historic first when we brought a number of spheres of government together. We brought all the MECs in the country here. We had the police minister, national treasury, and there's actually no divergence on how we approach this issue of construction mafia. And I again want to repeat that construction mafia are not, you know, sort of these innocent businesses that want to try and sort of, you know, get involved in business with government. These are people who are armed, dangerous, and are murderers. And they terrorize construction sites. And we must never, ever give them a single inch or lull ourselves into the belief that they are sort of, you know, good people and benevolent individuals, you know, who want to help us get our job done. And so we've become a lot more tougher, and I think that to his credit, General Mkhwanazi has really led from the front in that regard. And I mean, I don't have the latest stats, but you don't read about it. You don't hear these harrowing stories of people being chased off of construction sites. And I think that there's a closer working together between the private sector and government law enforcement agencies. So I think that we are making you know, gains in that space. But at the end of the day, if we want to attract investment, we've got to have policy certainty. And I think it was Terry who touched on that earlier. So the business community must be able to have line of sight into what our thinking is, into what our policy proposals are, and then to be robust and honest engagement about how to be able to guarantee people's investment. Because the thing about capital, right, it goes where it's secure. If you can't secure capital inflows, it's not going to come. So I know there's a lot of brouhaha in the GNU at the moment, and people are sending messages backwards and forwards, and sort of it maybe resembles a soap opera at the moment. But you know, I do want to say this. I think that we'll get through it. We have to get through it for the sake of this province, for the sake of our country, because the builders in our democracy have to stick together. If the breakers get hold of this country, we won't have anything left. So we're committed to providing that certainty. We're committed to working through issues. And I think that when sensible heads come together, we'll be able to prevail and provide even more certainty to the business community.
Let's bring in Mr. Mthuli as well into the fold. I know that Itala's main vision is to be a catalyst for growth, economic development, and empowerment. So as an entity that was established to promote economic development and empowerment in the province, what would you say have been your most notable and significant achievements, having listened to what the minister has also said?
Okay, thanks for that question. So Itala houses a number of business units that are targeted towards executing the developmental mandate on behalf of the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Business finance is one of them. We've got an implementing agent, but obviously the bigger business is the properties business. In the properties business, we participate in the KwaZulu-Natal economy on many levels. The first and probably most apparent is one where we actually offer accommodation to businesses. It could be small businesses or big business. We are not selective. In fact, we actually have a sub-portfolio that is dedicated specifically to house small business startups. We don't set hurdles that make it difficult for your smaller SMME to actually find an industrial premises to actually, undertake your business. But obviously, beyond being landlords, we also, obviously, in our very big portfolio, 1.2 million square meters under roof, and more than 2,000 hectares of mostly serviced commercial industrial land. I think it goes without saying that there's absolutely an immeasurable amount of opportunities that are actually out there for the private sector to participate. And in the past 7 months, we've really accelerated our drive towards bringing in that private sector capital. That is much needed. I think government pockets can only be as deep. I think we appreciate that the game of property is one that is capital intensive. And as a result, we do know that for our portfolio to grow, we need to actually have this partnership. So in the past 7 months, we've closed just over 1.3 billion rand worth of new business on the back of leaseholds, which is long-term leasing, 25-year leases. And we're currently sitting with a pipeline of about 600 million that we're hoping to convert and close within the next 2 or 3 months. And if we obviously continue on this tempo, I think nothing stops us from actually generating a 2 billion rand worth of inward investment coming into our portfolio. But not only that, also enabling, I think, a market that finds a great struggle to actually break the barriers to participate in the commercial property market. And this is why I actually appreciate this platform that was obviously initiated, I think, by our principals, because we do not talk enough about commercial property and the opportunity and the extent of economic development that obviously comes with the commercial property development, the number of jobs, the number of businesses that actually are created by even the value chain, and not just the businesses that you obviously see in the premises themselves. So we are engaging the private sector. We have been out to the market to actually invite people to have a look at our websites on available opportunities, engage us on assets that you obviously I think have on our on our portfolio, and where our properties are not making a profit or making a loss or actually making a marginal profit. We are more than happy to have that engagement in terms of how we can enter into some form of an agreement to enable inward investment that comes in to actually better our assets. And it's not a one-way, I think, beneficial relationship, because for us as government as well, when we have this investment on our assets, it obviously grows our asset base. And then at a terminal year of that leasehold, 25 years from now, I'm sure a lot of us won't be around, but those that will be around will then make a decision as to actually take over the assets in full with all its development and its economic benefits, or actually continue, I think, to lease it out to the private sector. But that way you create that opportunity, because some of the properties that you're sitting with, we've actually been sitting with them for more than 25 years, and without any development, without any economic benefits. If anything, we end up having to spend money on security rates and all the other associated cost to property.
And also, Mr. Scott, to bring you now in, I think one of the sub-themes that we've been hearing throughout the day is those of collaboration and how we are stronger as a unit as well. And I think the minister said that it would start with stability and at government level as well. Let's hear from you as to what would building public-private partnerships to enhance infrastructure in the province ideally look like for you?
Thank you. Thanks very much for the opportunity. When we talk about taking public infrastructure and doing something with the private sector, it falls under this notion of public procurement. So whenever we lease or we do a PPP with state property, it falls under this umbrella called public procurement. Now, in the past 10 plus years of research that I've been doing, you might find it odd to hear that South Africa right now is one of the least regulated countries in the world when it comes to public procurement.
No way.
Shall I say that again?
No.
We're one of the least regulated. Now, that's not your experience. It's not your experience.
No.
And part of the problem with that is that at a primary law level, if we just take the PFMA, the only thing we've got in the PFMA is one paragraph on public procurement. If we take the triple PFA, there's 2 pages at a primary law level. Now, that's where we are at the moment, and where that will change is with the Public Procurement Act, which has been enacted. We're not sure yet when it will be effective. That one paragraph will be changed by 35 pages, replaced by 35 pages. So we're moving from a place where, if one other example is a mechanism that we use very often in government is called a panel. There are panels. There is not one single piece of national legislation on panels. There's no instruction, there's no circle on a panel. So we're moving from that place. Now, I'd like to propose four things to bring about the stability and to help going forward. The first one is, I think we need to move away from the notion of only having public-private partnerships as per the current Treasury Regulation 16. We need to have public-private partnering as another option. If we look at all of these structures, these facilities, these properties we've got in the country, if we're going to take them all through the likes of the PPPs that we've got, we will never get there. First point. Second point is, we've got to be clear on the distinction between a concession and letting. Now, if Sand Parks takes a piece of property and they have a concession on that, versus the airports company taking a piece of their property and letting it to a restaurant, the fundamentals of those two are not very different. But yet the law between the two is very different and the complexity between the two is very different. So we've got to have a better distinction between those. The third one is, we've got to, in public procurement, be a lot more creative. If we want to have innovation, if we want to have creativity, if we want to bring in sustainability, we've got to be more creative in the methods that we use. We cannot consider an open public tender as being the only way, or a PPP as being the only way. What about having a design contest where you award through a competition where there's a jury, and there's a presentation, and the jury decides the winner? The fourth one is that I think we also need to move away from just thinking public-private partnerships to thinking about public-community partnerships. There's a notion in governments around the world, and we've not embraced that properly yet in South Africa, around community procurement. If we want to build a dam in an area, what happens is Public Works comes along, or Trans-Caledon Tunnel Authority comes along and says, right, we're going to appoint through an open competitive process a contractor. They move in, and then we have the problems because we've taken some construction company from Johannesburg to... We need to say, how can we have the community part of that, not just part of that procurement process, but integral to that procurement process. So I think we need to move towards public-community partnerships as well.
Beautiful. And Mr. Musinyane, just to find out from you, at municipal level, in terms of what are you doing? Because I think Mr. Scott has actually encapsulated it so well to say that all these relationships will also start with the level of everyone working together. Let's just hear from you in terms of what are you doing and how does the municipality factor in bolstering these relationships and making sure that everyone that is taking part is supported and supported fully?
Where do I start? Look, I think to put the minister and take the minister into confidence, from a policy point of view, we are certain about how we deal specifically with our capital asset at the municipality. Just for a bit of context, there's about 565,000 properties within eThekwini. We own just below 9% of that, just below 10%, at about 53,000. So by implication, it makes us probably one of the biggest landowners within our municipal jurisdiction. We obviously do not need them, or all of them, and that's where the underutilized and all of that then comes in. But when we crafted the policy in 2019, we then had to take into account certain things. There was a report that was issued by National Treasury in 2011, termed Local Government Budget and Expenditure Review. Chapter 6 of that report dealt with leveraging private sector finance. Because what the report indicated was that the traditional way of municipalities and how they make money is insufficient. I don't know if there's anybody who's not going to complain about how much they are paying on their rate and taxes, service charges and all of that. So there is then a need to broaden funding sources, and part of the 4 concepts they proposed that municipalities should explore was borrowings. You need a strong balance sheet for that. And I think probably there's only 2 or 3 municipalities in the country that can, or metros that can actually afford to be borrowing money. The second was development charges. The third one was land leases. And the fourth one was triple Ps. So when we then crafted our policy, we crafted in line with that, because what then the same report went further to say is we should not be selling land as a municipality, because it affects, and rightfully so, it affects your financial sustainability and your wellness. Essentially, when you are selling land to fund an infrastructure, you are giving away a capital appreciating asset in the form of land, and then exchanging it for an appreciating asset in the form of that. So on that context, that's when we then moved that one of the first policy positions we did was to then say we would not sell properties unless it's for exceptional circumstance. And those exceptions, we linked it back to the Constitution in terms of Section 26, which deals with the right for housing. So when we do sell land, it will most likely be for affordable housing, because it is a constitutional right in terms of the Constitution. What that model, the leasing model then does, is to assist us with a variety of things. When you deal with land, the minister, I think, mentioned Section 25 earlier on. Our mayor mentioned it as well. Section 25(5) is very clear about the state taking action to foster conditions to enable citizens to gain access on an equitable basis. And you can break that statement in terms of what is deemed to be reasonable, what is meant by equitable, and what is meant by access to land. Now, on the question of access, the requirement there is that it doesn't have to be necessarily through title deeds, but whatever tenure you give people, it has to be secured. Now, when you then read what leases are, if you read Section 102 of the Deeds Registries Act, it explains immovable property as a land lease that is over 10 years old. In a nutshell, if you have a long-term lease, you are in the same position as somebody who has a title deed. Now, in terms of then our policy position, that's what we've done. And I could give you 10 reasons as to why, but I could just at high level give you 3. One, we were wanting to create that equitable access, because with a long-term lease, you are then able to have a broader access because of the level of participation. One of the barriers of entry with regards to commercial property is access to capital. For a property with 50 million, that requires 150 million to build, you need 200 million. You first need to raise the 50 million for acquisition, and 150 million for sale. On a leasing, using the same definition of the Deeds Registries Act, you've essentially gotten a property with 50 million without paying for it. Upfront. And that's the cost of then lowering the business. So to put it in a nutshell, you need policy certainty, like the mayor the minister has indicated. And our policy position is that we would not sell properties. We can tell you from a financial sustainability point of view why that is the case, but equally, it helps us broaden the access and lower the cost of entry in terms of the property market. How we then implement that is just in 2 folds. We have low value, which is below 10 million, and high value, which is above 10 million. And we then introduce lease terms on that principle. Below 10 million, we do 30-year leases. And above 10 million, we do 45-year leases. I think the hotels is an exception because of the high value, but anything above 100 million, we go as far as about 50. Essentially, what we do there is to then create that access, because you've lowered the cost of entry with regards to that. But in addition to that, you then need to have incentive policies. We have an incentive policy within the city that talks about rate rebate. In terms of then wavering raise rebates to then incentivize developers with regards to development. In fact, I was listening to the, I think it's the premier when he was talking about student accommodations. Part of the things that we are then introducing as part of our rate policy is a rebate specifically looking at student accommodation, specifically on EFSAs, predominated that because we have not had a large development in terms of that. So in a nutshell, I think what we've done is eThekwini, I think the mayor touched on a few numbers in the morning. We've released about 97 properties.
Yeah.
The total capital value of those properties is about 922 million. What we've awarded is about 598. So essentially we've given, just through long-term leases, 598 million for people to go then raise their fund. What they must just then do is to go and raise the 4 billion in terms of capital investment that is going to be, to be done.
Let's bring you in, Minister, and just get you some of your reflections for what Mr. Musinyan has just said.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's
Sound.
The mic again.
They're both not working. Sound, please.
Yeah, don't pay them. So it's a great issue that the gentleman from eThekwini has introduced, because I ask myself this question all the time: why does the state need to own 88,000 buildings and 5 million hectares of land that we own? Imagine if you unleash that value, capital value. I'm not saying that they're all worth, that you can do something with them tomorrow. But imagine if you injected half of that, 75 billion rand worth of property assets, into the economy. And that would set the property market on fire. Because the private sector is just naturally able to gear and utilize those properties for economic value. Because if that wasn't the case, well, then the state would be doing that already, but it's not. So I think I've come to the conclusion that I want to see more public assets in public hands to drive economic growth and job creation, and particularly in inner cities. So we really want to be a contributor to inner city regeneration, and to be able to see those assets become, economic levers. I really do hope that a solution is found for Atala Bank, because I think Atala Bank has a big role to play in the plans that at least myself and the MEC and the Premier have for KwaZulu-Natal. And I think that Atala could be a real economic catalyst, transactional advisor, and financial, and I don't want to use the word bank because I'll get into trouble with the finance minister if I say that, but I think that there's a space. And we've seen the turnaround with African Bank. They went under, and they are doing fabulously well. So I really do hope that Atala is a solution is found, because capital and assets have to go together. And I think that there's a big role to play there. In terms of public procurement, and let me say the other side to that is asset disposal. It is really, really difficult to dispose of assets, and I'm absolutely committed to introducing legislative reform to be able to do so. I see the Honourable Bath has snuck out, but anyone who's in public works knows that Guiama is like a handbrake on what you want to be a speeding Ferrari. And so we need to be able to move with speed to be able to conclude transactions, be able to deliver those assets into hands that want to drive the economy. I also want to say that, and this is why Mr. Sabande was very focused on the rider or the foundation of this program that at least I am on, and I'm pretty sure the MEC is, that you've got to have conditions attached to, actually getting those leases. So you've got to be able to show some form of, equity. You've got to be able to show that you can raise capital. And that's why I think that I really hope that Atala does find its feet, because those partnerships, I think, are really, really key. And those partnerships with financial institutions are really key, because what you don't want is actually to drive those assets becoming worse than they are already. So they get into the hands of an individual who actually can't deliver on an economic proposal that they've made, and then that asset actually deteriorates and possibly becomes less than what it was when you gave them. And there's, umpteen examples of that all around the country. I also want to say that, when I look at something like the Cape Town waterfront, that is the perfect example of how public and private partnerships can work. So that is all owned by Transnet, and they are now investing another 20 billion rand into that precinct. The mayor of Cape Town told me that 70,000 people go into that precinct every day to work. 70,000. And that is a partnership between the state and the private sector. And we're looking to emulate that model in other ports and harbors that we own. I didn't know that I own ports and harbors until the 3rd of July last year, but that was news to me. So we are going to see how we drive that. So there are good examples, there's bad examples. I think that there's got to be synergy between capital and these assets. I think that this is a place for Itala, and I really do hope the provincial government and the Prudential Authority are able to come up with a solution. And I think that we've got to be able to give people an opportunity to drive this economy by placing assets into their hands.
Mr. Mthuli, let's bring you in. I can see there you've been taking notes as well.
Yeah, look, I think the comments that have been made by panelists here are hitting home. I think, Itala obviously has quite a significant role to play in this market, specifically the property market. And I'm sure a lot of people are probably asking themselves what's the difference basically between the role that Itala plays as a subset of, I think, IDFC, Development Finance Corporation, compared to the commercial banks. And the main difference is this big animal that is referred to as risk appetite. The term risk appetite is quite big in the ivory towers of big banks. And unfortunately, for a developmental state like South Africa, and maybe you can drill it down to the province, the supply side of capital needs to have more appetite in order to unlock more opportunities and take a view on smaller startup businesses backed by hard thoughts and hard research that looks to be plausible, and actually put the money in there so that such businesses can thrive, because when those businesses thrive, then they obviously create opportunities. And that is really the core of what is at stake with all that is actually happening, I think, with Itala. So another side of the coin is around the trust deficit that actually exists between government and private sector funding. You must remember that the common denominator of, I think, the conversations that you've had this afternoon is around capital being invested, and obviously the lease coming and playing its role in providing that equity component. But still capital is required. And we have not really drilled down to where's this money going to be coming from. Are we speaking billions coming inward in investment and all of the stuff? Most of this money is obviously not going to be coming from government. Yes, you've got NEF. Yes, you've got IDC. You've got various, financing institutions within government. But government alone is actually a small drop in the ocean. Most of this capital comes from the market and via the conduit of banks. So, Honorable Minister, if there's one thing that I think has to really, really be pushed hard, is around ensuring that the risk appetite from the commercial private bank actually aligns and recognizes the government paper, recognizing the sovereign paper. I think I come from a world, I think in the past 2 decades, where a company presents a 9-year, 11 months lease from Public Works, where there's a user department being, call it, Home Affairs. a bank would take that paper, recognize it as a sovereign paper, and the fact that it actually has quite a decent tenure, being 9 years, 11 months, discount those rentals to come up with a quantum to say that we're actually going to fund this individual because we're trusting this paper. Forget the fact that this individual actually doesn't have as much experience as you typically have with the clients that you have in your book. Forget the fact that this particular client actually doesn't come with any equity, but has this building or he's bought this building and he's obviously got this paper, a very valuable paper from Public Works, and we can actually fund him. And through that, a lot of big businesses were actually built. Unfortunately, until that whole big saga in the middle of Pretoria happened, and then, those taps actually started to close. But we need to resuscitate that conversation. It becomes very important because I think, in my view, there was one big opportunity through which government could fast track and open up the market to more participants and actually drive even transformation around the participation in commercial property. So that is obviously still hanging in there, and we need to get it sorted. Thank you.
Sure. Go ahead, Mr. Scott.
There's a sense of urgency. There's urgency in where we are, and there's a sense of urgency that we need to move fast. Now, one of the difficulties is that with the Public Procurement Act, which was signed by the President last year, the regulations are now being developed. Once those regulations have been developed, then there will be a process of parliamentary consultation, and eventually the President will sign those, and then the organs of state, both at a local level, provincial, national, will be given an opportunity to get their policies and their processes and their people ready for those new regulations. Now, right now, it's difficult to dispose of something because there's very little legislation on how to dispose. And that will not be the case with the new Public Procurement Act. So right now, because we have very little legislation, I think there's an opportunity to responsibly, I think there's an opportunity to responsibly use the gap that we've got to move quickly, because once those new regulations are enacted, it's possibly going to be even more difficult than now, because we're going to have a whole cadre of public procurement practitioners that we have to change, we have to train, we have systems that have to change, we have policies and procedures that have to change, and that could take some time to get done. So I think there's some urgency to use the opportunity now, because it could be quite some time before we really understand what the new regulations are like.
And let's bring it back to the municipality, Mr. Musiane. I think Mr. Mthuli said something to the effect that there's this, what he called a trust deficit with the government and private sector. Let's hear on your end in terms of how do we bridge the gap as far as that is concerned.
I'm not sure if I should work. I'm audible. Look, I'll speak for the unit I lead.
Yeah.
I think one of the strategic things we did last year, even through the development of the program, was consultation with the banks. Just to take them in confidence with regards to the kind of processes we are following, the kind of due diligence we are doing. So far, we have not had any issues in terms of those, because even last year, they do now sit on our briefing session, so they are able to then see the entire process in terms of how we conduct ourselves with regards to the processes that we are following. Even as far as having documentations and the rationale in terms of our documentation and its makeup, we did that, and I think we are seeing the result. To a certain degree, I would say I'm not sharing the same experience that Mr. Mthuli has, because even in the last release that we did that closed in December, we have a potential investment of about 300 million. Last year we had NEF, we had ABSA, we had Nedbank, as well as I think it was TAF at our briefing sessions. Almost 60% of that 300 million is coming from NEF, ABSA, as well as Nedbank, through an expression of interest to fund those development. I believe they do so because of the confidence they have in terms of the processes we are following. And I think just to also touch on the point that the minister made, capability and track record in property is very important. We were almost hanged for the hotels and the conditions we had about the hotels. Secondly, property is a scaling game. There is no way you can move from 0 to 300 million on your first project. There's no way. We, as property practitioners, we know that. That is an eminent risk in terms of how you then structure your development proposals. And I think that's why we sort of spread low value versus high value, because low value is where the capital cost is not that intensive, so we can be flexible. But one of the things that we did, which I'll confess here that politically we criticized, is to insist on an expression of interest to fund upfront. That was seen as a barrier of entry, but it's not necessarily a barrier of entry. It's the comfort and the comfortability that you are bankable, one as a person. It works the same way pre-approval for a home loan works. If your credit record is bad and you can't afford the house you want to buy, you don't want to get it. It's the same thing that we then put up front as a mandatory to say, we want that expression of interest up front. But what the comfort it gives is that a bank would have looked at your proposal, that it fits into their funding model. 1, 2, the development you want to build is actually part of the priority development areas where they are funding. And then 3, if you are then successful, it is then to convert that expression of interest to fund into a formal approval for that. It remains, in fact, execution of this kind of things by its very nature, the highest risk you have is in execution. If you do not insist on those kind of things, you are going to appoint somebody for a 300 million rent project, whereas they cannot even raise $1 million. But you can pick those things up front by merely just insisting as a mandatory requirement that if you are proposing 1 million as an investment, please show me where you have that million or where you're going to raise it. And I think that's where the banks are coming. Like I said, I think my experience in terms of the release is that you do see even the big banks coming on board to try and fund off some of these things. And I think lastly, just to add again, going back to the funding issue, I don't think we hold PIC accountable enough in terms of their funding. If you look at the top 100 JSE listed companies, you're going to find PIC in all of them. It's big business, yes, but coming down in terms of funding small businesses. The minister is correct. I think Itala can play a role in terms of funding SMMEs, even within the property development space. But when you look at the biggest or the richest asset manager we have in the country, funding, and shockingly, it's owned by government through the PIC. Why is that money not being used to fund some of the infrastructure projects?
Pertinent questions there. Nice. Mr. Scott, we are winding it down now. Let's get your final remarks.
I think there's massive opportunity. I think that we have a constitution which 217 is very progressive, and I think we must just embrace it. We must embrace the opportunity we've got with new legislation and move forward.
All right. And let's also hear from Mr. Mthuli.
Yeah, all I can say is that KZN is open for business. I think a lot of my background has been in the private sector, in the banking sector specifically. I'm here in the public sector because I see so many opportunities to bring about a significant change. Yeah. I could have chosen to be anywhere, and I think there's absolutely measurable amount of opportunities that sit in the hands of government. I appreciate what is happening at a national level. I think we're also cooking here within the province in terms of what you're trying to advance in as far as opening up the industry. I look at what my colleague Yetapel has actually been able to achieve with the Tegwini. I cannot help but be inspired to actually do more and more and more, and know that at some point in time, one is going to look back and say, I made such a significant change. exchange in eThekwini as well as KwaZulu-Natal. So we do hope that business people out there, you open up your purses, you come and invest in property before anyone actually wakes up to take these opportunities away from you. Thanks.
Mr. Mtuli says they are cooking, Minister. What do you say?
Say on full heat, full gas. You know, he's right, because I don't think, I mean, let's just cast our memories back. Before 2024, I don't think these conversations were being had to the extent that they are with property developers. Certainly not in the since COVID, we haven't had these sort of discussions. And I think that, you know, that this is testament to say that actually, I think people see that government has woken up to the opportunity, wants to partner, wants to put its assets to use. And I think that KZN is well placed to do so. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I would far rather be in KZN during the winter than in the Western Cape. I think that KZN has a unique tourism offering. I think that the costs of doing business here are lower, despite eThekwini's property rates, but we won't talk about that here. I think that you know, there's so much more going on, and I think that there is value to be unlocked here in KZN. I think that maybe the Western Cape, you know, might be at the top of its value proposition, but I think that there's massive amounts of value to be unlocked here. And I know that because look at where Club Med is deciding to build its new South African resort. It's here in KwaZulu-Natal. They could have gone to anywhere, and they came here to KwaZulu-Natal because they see the value proposition for tourism. So it's within our hands, as they would say in politics. I think that you've got a really good, capable leadership here in this province. I think the Premier is a dedicated man who has a vision. I think you've got a group of MECs that are really hardworking. And I think that things are starting to come right in eThekwini as well. It's a long way to go, but I think that Mayor Kaba is definitely moving the city in the right direction. And all of those things come together. And now people need to, you know, put their money on the table and let's get this economy cooking on full gas then.
All right, Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, Mr. Dean McPherson. We're also joined by eThekwini Municipality Head of Real Estate, Mr. Tabelo Musinyane. Mr. Sean Scott is the Managing Director of World Power Consulting and author of Public Procurement and Supply Chain Management, as well as Mr. Malusi Mtuli, who's from the Itala Properties, who's an executive there. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. We're not taking Q&A for this one, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen. I'm told we've overran already, but thank you so much. A round of applause again for my panelists. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we will proceed now. I would like to call upon the acting head of department, Dr. Vish Governor, to come and announce, give us an announcement on commissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. And I think we've come to the important part of where this conference needs to go. And my job today is quite easy because I need to direct you to the deliberations that we're going to have at each of the rooms that we've provided and the topics that will be discussed at those specific rooms. The MEC has asked me to apologize as well to each of you for not allowing any chances for questions due to the fact that we were running short of time. But what we would like to also do then is to allow those who wanted to ask questions to pose that within the commissions. What that would do then, it would give wind to what you have to bring to the fore, and the commission chairs will then escalate that to the relevant officials like myself and those who need to be, those questions need to be posed at. And we will endeavor as far as possible, if those questions are not within the commission's role or responsibility, we would then respond to yourself in writing. The first commission is that of urban renewal and property optimization, and it's at room 11AB. We will also guide you guys tomorrow with regards to where's 11AB. And the purpose of this commission is to explore strategies for the repurposing, utilizing, and disposing urban properties to drive urban renewal and optimize property portfolios within the metropolitan areas. This commission will focus on identifying underutilized assets, leveraging public and private collaboration, and developing actionable strategies for the effective urban property management. The second commission will be that of rural and peri-urban development, and the purpose of that would be to discuss and develop strategies for optimizing public land and property in rural and peri-urban areas, focusing on fostering economic growth, addressing infrastructure challenges, and supporting sustainable development through government buildings and residential facilities. The Commission will highlight opportunities for community engagement, public sector collaboration, and innovative property optimization in less urbanized groups. The room number for that is 21AB, and we'll also be ushering yourselves tomorrow. The last commission, which we know is going to receive much attention from the delegates who have graced us today, and that being public-private partnership forums. The purpose, the goal is to examine innovative financial models, identify legislative why is my program doing this? My numbers are not numbering. I would say that to my staff. And I see my program is printed differently. All right, I think the goal here is basically what we want to achieve within this P forum is exactly what Minister McPherson has been saying tirelessly, and those that were before us on the stage, is to unlock the red tape that's hindering progress in terms of establishing Ps. And something that Mr. Scott raised, and I wrote it down, was the new term is public-community partnership, and I love that term. And I think that's something that we need to look at, and I walked over to my MEC and I said to him that those are some of the things that we need to engage with yourself tomorrow, and we'd like to have that audience. Now, the chairpersons for the Commission 1 will be Mr. Eric Appelgren. I think he's within the House, so he's probably left. He's from Ethekwini. The Deputy Chair is Ms. Xoli Ntanzi. I think she's here, if you can stand up. Thank you. The second commission will be chaired by Mr. Tobusini Mkunu. I think he's around. Can you stand up, sir? All right, he's right in the back. And co-chaired by Mr. Bongani Dlamini, who's also present today. You can stand up. Thank you. And the third commission will be chaired by Mr. Pravesh Balaram. I think he's on my right, extreme right. Thank you. And co-chaired by Ms. Khan. Can you stand up, Ms. Khan? Thank you. So these are the commission chairs and co-chairs. And what we would like, ladies and gentlemen, is to advocate as much discussion as possible. But also we want to bear in mind that there may be many people in one commission, and we want to obviously divide them equitably, but also ensure that everyone gets a chance to be engaged with and engage, obviously the chairs and the co-chairs, and then post that, we will obviously then come about with a policy document or a blueprint that we're going to utilize post this conference in order to set action plans and obviously list those responsible persons that will be guiding those action plans and cascade it into a medium-term expenditure framework. I therefore thank you for affording us an opportunity to provide these commissions and provide you a space to get into these rooms and deliberate on key issues that affect not only the people of KZN, I think, but the people of this country. And Program Director, I think my job has ended for today, and thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Sorry? Yes, the last commission, my apology, sorry ma'am. The last commission will be in this room. It will be on the right-hand side, it meaning that way, your left, my right. and we will be ushering you guys as well. The reason being why we chose this plenary for the last commission is due to the fact that we're envisaging a lot of attendees to this particular commission, and we didn't want to house you all in a facility that could not provide for the amount of people that we envisage. Thank you, and my apology. Thank you.
Thank you very much, HOD. Now, for the last part of the day, we'd like to get the vote of thanks from the MEC for Public Works and Infrastructure, Honorable Martin Meyer.
Thank you so much, everyone. And let me start off by saying that today was the day where we talk. Government loves talking, but tomorrow is the day that we listen. Because listening is very important, and it's a lost skill in government in South Africa that we're trying to bring back. So please, you have to attend these commissions. If you criticize, please come and criticize. If you think there's ways we can learn, come so that we learn. This is the opportunity for you to speak to us and say, change the policy, change things. This is the ideas I have. This is the suggestions I have for your land. That's your opportunity to come to us, and we will compile all that together and learn. You can see for the day of talking, I put on my nice suit, which is also my only suit, and my only pointed pair of pointed shoes. I changed my Converse. I might just wear my Converse tomorrow because there was a lot of walking. So tomorrow is the exciting day where we give you the opportunity to talk to us, and I'm very happy about that. I'm going to give my full thanks tomorrow to everyone, but let me just say today very shortly to the wonderful staff of the Department of Public Works. I said this morning in my address that, fasten your seatbelts and put up your tray tables. And then I see all our staff look like they work for an airline today with their beautiful blue scarves they're wearing. So we can now call it Air Public Works, and we're taking off to a new future in KwaZulu-Natal. And I'm very excited about it. And they've been so professional and wonderful. So to all of you who came today, listened to these speeches, participated, I'm very, very grateful. I'll do a proper thanks tomorrow. But please, these plenaries is actually the important part. This is the engine of what we're doing. So I hope to see you all tomorrow in these 3 plenaries. Thank you so much. Drive safe, enjoy your evenings, and see you all tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the day. We thank you so much for being with us today. So from myself, Mkolisi Masango Londiwe Mdaba, and Mhlonishwa Nyembezi, have a spectacular afternoon going forward. Take care.